Today we're going to talk about a subject that I usually get a lot of questions about, and that's the Deathly Hallows. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the path of the Deathly Hallows in detail, all the way up to where they are at this point in time today in the Wizarding world. And that's the Invisibility Cloak, the Resurrection Stone, and yes, the Elder Wand. Let's start where it all began, at the Tale of Three Brothers. The Tale of Three Brothers involves the three Peveril brothers that cheated death to receive three gifts. The tale goes, there were once three brothers who were traveling along a lonely, winding road at twilight. In time, the brothers reached a river, too deep to wade through and too dangerous to swim across. However, these brothers were learned in the magical arts, and so they simply waved their wands and made a bridge appear across the treacherous water. They were halfway across it when they found their path blocked by a hooded figure, and it was Death. He was angry that he had been cheated out of the three new victims, for travelers usually drowned in the river, but Death was cunning. He pretended to congratulate the three brothers upon their magic, and said that each had earned a prize for being clever enough to evade him. So, the oldest brother, who was a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that must always win battles for its owner, a wand worthy of a wizard who had conquered death. So Death crossed to an elder tree on the banks of the river, fashioned a wand from a branch that had hung there, and gave it to the oldest brother. Then the second brother, who was an arrogant man, decided that he wanted to humiliate Death still further, and asked for the power to recall others from death. So Death picked up a stone from the riverbank and gave it to the second brother, and told him that the stone would have the power to bring back the dead. Finally, Death turned to the third brother, a humble man. He asked for something that would enable him to go forth from the place without being followed by Death. And so it was that Death reluctantly handed over his own cloak of invisibility. So now, let's discuss the Hallows as we see them in the Harry Potter series in regards to the brothers that receive them. Ignotus, the Invisibility Cloak, Cadmus, the Resurrection Stone, and Antioch, the Elder Wand. The Invisibility Cloak. Ignotus was the humblest and wisest of the brothers and didn't trust Death. This Hallow became the most useful Hallow for Harry Potter himself. Death searched for many years, but was never able to find Ignotus until an old age. At an old age, Ignotus, it is said, shed the cloak of invisibility and gave it to his son. He then greeted Death as an old friend. The wizarding family, Potter, is explained on Pottermore.com. Quote, the wizarding family of Potters descends from the 12th century wizard Linfred and Stinchcombe, a locally well-beloved and eccentric man whose nickname, the Potterer, became corrupted in time to Potter. Linfred's eldest son, Hardwin, married a beautiful young witch by the name Lanthe Peveril, who came from the village of Godric's Hollow. She was the grandmother of Ignotus Peveril. In the absence of male heirs, she, the eldest of her generation, had inherited her grandfather's invisibility cloak. If was explained to Hardwin, a tradition in her family that the possession of this cloak remain a secret, and her new husband respected her wishes. From this time on, the cloak was handed down to the eldest in each new generation. The Potters continued to marry their neighbors, occasionally Muggles, and continued to live in the west of England for several generations, each one adding to their family coffers by the hard work and, it must be said, by the quiet brand of ingenuity that had characterized their forebear, Linfred. Henry Potter was a direct descendant of Hardwin, served on the Wizengamot from 1913 to 1921. Henry's son was Fleamont Potter. Fleamont made the Potters very wealthy by creating Sleek Easy hair potion. Fleamont sold his company and retired. For a long time, Fleamont and his wife Euphemia were childless, but then Euphemia gave birth to a boy, James. Fleamont and Euphemia saw James marry Lily Evans, but they died before meeting their grandson Harry Potter. The couple died of dragonpox at an old age, and James Potter inherited the cloak. James and Lily Evans were killed by Voldemort, and the Cloak of Invisibility was kept safe for years, until Dumbledore gave it as a Christmas gift to Harry Potter. Quote, his next present also contained candy, a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. This only left one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavored beans he'd gotten from Hermione. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked the shiny, silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to the touch, like water woven into material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders, and Ron gave a yell. It is! Look down. Harry looked down at his feet, but they were gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head, and his reflection vanished completely. There's a note, said Ron, suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before were the following words. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. I'd give anything for one of these, he said. Anything? What's the matter? Nothing, said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? This shows how the invisibility cloak was passed down all the way to Harry. Dumbledore explains the origins of the cloak to Harry. Quote, the cloak, as you know now, traveled down through the ages, father to son, mother to daughter, right down to Ignatus's last living descendant, who was born as Ignatus was in the village of Godric's Hollow. End quote. Dumbledore smiled at Harry. Me? You have guessed. I know. Why the cloak was in my possession on the night your parents died. James had showed it to me, just a few days previously. The invisibility cloak was used often by Harry, Ron, and Hermione during their time at Hogwarts and played a significant role in their journey to ultimately defeating Voldemort. The Elder Wand. The Elder Wand was the most powerful wand in the universe, made by Death himself. Made of elder wood, and its core is the tail of a thestral, 15 inches long. It is thought special magic could be channeled with this wand, such as mending other wands. Quote from Tales of Beetle and the Bard. The eldest brother, a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence. Death granted his wish by fashioning the Elder Wand from a branch of a nearby elder tree, standing on the banks of a river. The eldest brother traveled to a village where a wizard whom he had quarreled lived. He sought out a duel and fought the wizard using the wand, instantly killing the latter, leaving his enemy dead upon the floor. The eldest brother walked to an inn not far from the dueling site and spent the night there, taken by his conscience and lust of the Elder Wand's power. The eldest brother boasted of his wand, gifted by Death and his own invincibility. That very night, Death transfigured to a murderous wizard. The unknown murderous wizard crept to the inn as the eldest brother slept, drunk from wine. The wizard slit the oldest brother's throat for good measure and stole the wand. That was when Death took the first brother. Who owned the wand after Antioch Peveril? According to Xenophilius Lovegood, the wand splattered across the pages of the wizarding history with blood, which led it to be called the Death Stick. Eventually, the wand made its way to Emmerich the Evil, an exceptionally aggressive wizard. It is said he terrorized the south of England with the wand in the early Middle Ages. It has been rumored that he had a thirst for power and violence, and could even ride dragons. He engaged in a ferocious duel with Egbert the Egregious, and it is said his death was gruesome. Egbert the Egregious, it is not known how long he possessed the wand, but Dumbledore suggested he did not last long. It is thought another wizard killed him for it. Almost a century later, Godelo was another wizard that was recorded for having the wand. Godelo wrote the famous book Magique Most Evil. He used the wand to push the boundaries of magic. The book, Magique Most Evil, has been characterized by letting out a ghostly wail. A copy of the book was kept in the restricted section of Hogwarts, and Hermione Granger checked it out in 1997 in an attempt to gain information on Horcruxes. Godelo was killed by his own son, who locked him up in a cellar to gain ownership of the wand. Hereward, Godelo's son, owned the wand next. Little is known about him, but he ultimately lost ownership of it. Barnabas Deverell owned the wand in the early 18th century. He utilized the wand and earned the reputation as a fearsome warlock. If you don't know, a warlock is a term that's differentiated from a wizard and a witch. So a warlock is generally a term used to describe a wizard that has denoted what they have learned to dueling in all martial magic, or was given as a title to a wizard who has. Sometimes this is used incorrectly as an interchangeable word for wizard. Barnabas' reign of terror ended when he was murdered by a wizard, Loxias. Loxias ruthlessly murdered many people and made the name of the wand the Death Stick. According to Dumbledore, many people wanted Loxias dead, and even Loxias' own mother claimed to try to finish him off. No one is quite sure who killed Loxias because so many people wanted him dead. The following events of the Elder Wand on the timeline are a little bit not known to history, but the next wizards that possibly owned the Elder Wand, according to Xenophilius, were either Arcus or Livius. One of these two most likely owned the wand, but the next recorded owner of the Elder Wand is actually famous Mikhail Grigorovich. Mikhail bragged about his ownership of the Elder Wand to promote his wand shop, and it was stolen by the infamous Gellert Grindelwald. Grindelwald used the wand and started an uprising in the wizarding world, but in 1945 he was defeated by the famous Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore was the wand owner for a long time, but during the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, Draco Malfoy disarmed him and became the wand's new owner. It is not true you have to kill someone to become the wand's owner. The wand, unfortunately, happens to have a bloody history. At this time, people thought a defeat was necessary for the wand to change hands, but this was not true, and Draco became the owner of the wand. Harry Potter became the final owner of the wand almost 1 year later after taking Draco's wand by force at Malfoy Manor, making him the true owner of the Elder Wand. After the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry ended the trail of the wand. Keep in mind, the book's end of the wand is different from the films. Quote, "I'm putting the Elder Wand back where it came from. It can stay there. If I die a natural death like Ignotus, its power will be broken, won't it? The previous master will never have been defeated. That'll be the end of it." In the film, unlike the book, Harry snaps the wand and tosses it over the Hogwarts bridge. Voldemort was never a true owner because he broke into Dumbledore's grave and attempted to use it, but was never the true owner of the wand. The Resurrection Stone. Cadmus was given the abilities to transform it into the Resurrection Stone. Cadmus used the stone to bring back a woman that died that he planned to marry. Cadmus brought her back, and she wasn't herself. The woman suffered while she was back in the world of the living. As a result, Cadmus committed suicide and hung himself so he could truly be with his lover. The stone was eventually fitted into a ring that was passed down as a family heirloom and eventually made its way from the Peverills to the Gaunts. The ring with the stone on it made its way to Marvolo Gaunt. Bob Ogden, a British wizard who worked for the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, came to visit the Gaunts because he had reason to believe Morphin used magic in front of a muggle. To Bob's surprise, he was greeted by knife and wand point from Morphin. Morphin fired a dark curse to Ogden, and Marvolo had to call him off. Marvolo served a 6-month sentence in Azkaban and died soon after. Morphin served 3 years. Morphin wore the ring after Marvolo's death. Tom Riddle came to the Gaunt Shack seeking information. He killed his relatives in the shack and pocketed the ring. Tom Riddle wore the ring for a time, but then turned the ring into a Horcrux. At the time, Riddle hid the ring back in the Gaunt Shack. Years later, Albus Dumbledore was able to track down and discover the ring. Albus realized the ring contained the Resurrection Stone and longed to see his sister Ariana Dumbledore again. Dumbledore put the ring on, and the cursed Riddle put on the ring activated, and it shattered his life. Dumbledore had approximately 1 year to live. Dumbledore used Godric Gryffindor's sword to destroy the ring that was a Horcrux, and Dumbledore sealed the stone in the first snitch Harry Potter caught in a Quidditch match. After Albus Dumbledore's death, Harry Potter inherited the snitch containing the stone in his will. Albus placed charms on the snitch, and it would not open. The snitch contained the words, quote, "I open at the close," end quote. Harry decided that he would reveal himself to Voldemort and make the ultimate sacrifice. The snitch opened, and the Resurrection Stone was revealed. Harry was joined by the spirits of his deceased loved ones. It has been expressed the shades of spirits are more than ghosts, transparent. They produced a Patronus-like effect that shielded him from Dementors. Harry never had an intention of becoming a Master of Death. Harry dropped the stone in the forest after he was resurrected and made the ultimate sacrifice. "The thing that was hidden in the snitch," he began. "I dropped it in the forest. I don't know exactly where, but I'm not going to go looking for it again. Do you agree?" "My dear boy, I do," said Dumbledore, while his fellow pictures looked confused and curious. "A wise and courageous decision, but no less than I would have expected of you. Does anyone else know where it fell?" "No one," said Harry, and Dumbledore nodded his satisfaction. J.K. Rowling was in an interview and was asked if the stone would ever be found. Quote, "I think not. I imagined that it was squashed in the ground by centaurs, hoofs of the centaurs, dashed to the aid of Hogwarts fighters, and therefore became buried." A question I always get asked is death real? The tale of three brothers comes from the tales of Beedle and the Bard. When asked in an interview about the Beatles' stories, J.K. Rowling said, if his stories accurately reflect his opinions, he rather liked Muggles, whom he regarded as ignorant rather than malevolent. He mistrusted dark magic, and he believed that the worst excesses of wizard kind sprang from the all-too-human traits of cruelty, apathy, or arrogant misapplication of their own talents. The heroes and heroines who triumph in his stories are not those with the most powerful magic, but rather those who demonstrate the most kindness, common sense, and ingenuity. The three Hallows genuinely existed, but it could be said Beedle was adding his own spin and the wizards created the Hallows themselves. There is no proof, but here's what Albus Dumbledore said in regards to it. "So it's true?" asked Harry. "All of it? The Peverell brothers? Were the three brothers of the tale?" said Dumbledore, nodding. "Oh yes, I think so. Whether they met death on a lonely road, I think it more likely the Peverell brothers were simply gifted, dangerous wizards who succeeded in creating those powerful objects. The story of them being Death's own Hallows seems to me the sort of legend that might have sprung up around such creations. Personally, my thought is Death didn't actually exist. My personal opinion is they were just three very powerful wizards that wanted to create three very powerful magical objects. Remember what Dumbledore says. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure." Another question I also get often asked is in regards to the veil that's in the Department of Mysteries. Could the veil be the origin of the Resurrection Stone? Is the Resurrection Stone just a piece of the veil? To this question, I do not know. It's up to yours to determine, but I think it could be plausible. In an interview, J.K. Rowling said, "The veil's been there as long as the Ministry of Magic has been there. And the Ministry of Magic has been there not as long as Hogwarts, but a very long time. We're talking hundreds of years. It's not important to know exactly When, but centuries definitely. J.K. Rowling in an interview also mentioned the second brother in the Resurrection Stone. She mentions Cadmus in regards to bringing his lover back to life. She says, sad and cold separated from him by a veil. This causes the theory that maybe Cadmus created the Resurrection Stone from the veil, and the veil was created to bring his lover back to life. The veil is a structure in the Department of Mysteries. It seems to be the barrier between the living and the dead. One cannot travel between the two worlds. Unspeakables actually used to study this closely. Quote, he had the strongest feeling that there was someone standing right behind the veil on the other side of the archway. Gripping his wand very tightly, he edged around the dais, but there was nobody there. All that could be seen was the other side of the tattered black veil. Sirius Black, in a duel with Bellatrix Lestrange, fell through this veil and was killed. It is not positive that Bellatrix killed Sirius. In the book, Bellatrix does not use the killing curse when he is pushed through the veil, unlike the film. The veil could have been Sirius's cause of death, being it's a one-way trip. When Harry decided to make the ultimate sacrifice and carried with him the Resurrection Stone, Sirius actually appeared. Quote, they were neither ghosts nor truly flesh. He could see that. They resembled most closely the riddle that had escaped from the diary so long ago. He had been a memory made nearly solid, less substantial than living bodies, but much more like ghosts. They moved toward him, and on each face there was the same loving smile. James was exactly the same height as Harry. He was wearing clothes which he dyed, and his hair was untidied, ruffled, and his glasses were a little lopsided, like Mr. Weasley's. Sirius was tall and handsome, and younger by far than Harry had seen him in life. He loped with an easy grace, his hands in his pockets, and grin on his face. Lupin was younger too, and much less shabby, and his hair was thicker and darker. He looked happy to be back in this familiar place, scene of so many adolescent wanderings. Lily's smile was wildest of all. She pushed her hair back, so she drew closer to him, and her green eyes, so like his, searched his face hungrily, as though she would never be able to look at him enough. It seems the stone only appears to bring people back as shades of themselves, just like Cadmus's case with his lover. The chamber in the Department of Mysteries studied love, space, time, and death. It is thought that being so old, the Resurrection Stone could be a piece of the veil, and it is possible could be created by Cadmus himself. The stone actually generates shades of the dead people, whereas the veil, you can only hear those from the land of the dead, and you cannot communicate back with the voices in the veil unless you go completely through. Quote, it seemed to take Sirius an age to fall. His body curved in a graceful arc as he sank backwards through the ragged veil hanging from the arch. Harry saw the look of mingled fear and surprise on his godfather's wasted, once handsome face as he fell through the ancient doorway and disappeared behind the veil, which fluttered for a moment as though in a high wind, then fell back into place. It is also described that the veil is crumbling and cracked. So could it be that the Resurrection Stone is a piece that cracked and broke off? A question that I also get asked often is, why was it Harry, Ginny, and Luna and Neville hear voices in the Department of Mysteries and were entranced with the veil as opposed to Ron and Hermione? Let's answer this. So first, we only know for a fact that Harry and Luna heard voices. This is most likely because they experienced death and both could see thestrals. Neville was entranced, most likely because his grandfather died while he was present. Ginny never experienced death, but she was possessed by Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets. During this time, Tom's memory presented itself to Harry and could have been a shade of Tom, like the Resurrection Stone presenting itself to Harry with his friends and family and loved ones before he made the ultimate sacrifice. So what do you think? Do you think there is a connection between the veil and the Resurrection Stone? The following is a conversation between Luna and Harry Potter. Luna: and anyways, it's not as though I'll never see Mom again, is it? Isn't it? Oh, come on. You heard them. Just behind the veil, didn't you? You mean in that room with the archway? They were just lurking out of sight, that's all. You heard them. If you would like to know more about Harry Potter and the Wizarding World lore, subscribe to Chase and Josh Factor Fantasy Podcast. The link is in the bio, or you can subscribe to Ridiculous Patronus on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. Have a magical week. Today we're going to talk about a